Welcome back. At this stage of the project, we're typically fleshing out our designs and refining our models. Most notably, we start to replace those single line windows and doors from the schematic design with more realistic looking frames and glazing, etc. We might also be thinking about joinery, staircases, furniture items, the list goes on. We can model each of these things from scratch, and sometimes we might have to, but by far the most efficient way to do this in SketchUp is by using components. I assume at this stage that you already know what a component is, as well as how a component in SketchUp differs from a group, etc. So I won't go over that. What I do want to talk to you about though is what I call smart components. Now, there is such a thing as dynamic components in SketchUp, and I don't want you to get confused here. Dynamic components are something else entirely. They are specially created components that contain data, formulas, and even bits of code that allow you to input various attributes to change their size, shape, appearance, etc. Indeed, I'd need a whole extra module just to explain these, so I'll let you explore them on your own. Have a look through the component library that comes with SketchUp and the 3D warehouse, and you'll find hundreds of dynamic components for use in your models, from window frames to picket fences and bookshelves. Let's leave dynamic components for now though. In this lesson, I want to talk about building your own smart components. They might not be quite as exciting as dynamic components, but they are a hell of a lot quicker to make and will save you almost as much time. Okay, in the last module, we looked at creating quick and dirty drawings by simply dropping 2D information such as door swings and window frames onto the drawings and layout. This is okay for schematic design and simple projects, but when things start to change, and they inevitably do, it can be a bit tiresome to have to also manually update all of this 2D line work. I also like things to be as quick and as easy as I can make them, which is why I add the 2D information to my 3D components. Let me show you how. Let's look at some examples I've got set up here in this model. If we look at this door component and double click it to open it up, you can see that it consists of 3 separate groups. There is the door frame, which works fine in both 3D and 2D. Then there's the door itself in the closed position. This looks good in 3D, but I don't want to see this in my plan views because I want to show an open door swing. That's why it's on a tag called 3D only. There's also a 2D only group. You'll see here there's a separate tag for 2D only elements. And within here, I've got a 2D drawing of the door in an open position and the door swing, and also some dashed lines in elevation to show how the door opens and closes. Because I only want to see this information in my plans, sections and elevation drawings, I'm able to just turn that information on and off by toggling the 2D only tag. Okay, let's also have a look now at this wardrobe component, and you'll see that I've got a similar thing set up. The wardrobe itself is simply modeled as a solid element with the doors placed on the front like this. It looks great in 3D, but in plan it can look a bit blocky. So if I turn the 3D only tag off for this component, you'll see the wardrobe disappears. And beneath this wardrobe model, I've also got a 2D group, which is on the 2D only tag. It would be inefficient at this scale to model all of the joinery itself, the hanging rails, the internal hanging garments, etc., as we're only going to see it on the one plan drawing. The last example I want to show you is a little bit more complex, and this is a simple kitchen component that I have saved. If we double click to open the component, you'll see that these upper cabinets are on a 3D only layer. That's so that I can show them as a dashed line above when I'm working on my plan drawings. Also within here, you'll notice that I've got the joinery itself, which is just simply untagged like the door frames, because this works equally well in plan, section and elevation. But the two main elements, the cooktop and the sink, if you see over here, they've each got their own 2D and 3D information. So if I double click the sink to open it, now you'll see if I turn off 3D only, I have a 2D graphic of that sink available. Likewise, if I turn that off, I just have a nice kind of 3D view of the sink. The same thing I can do with my cooktop over here. If I open it up, you'll see that I have a simplified 2D view of this cooktop, as well as a nice 3D model of it. This is just to simplify the plan drawings, because when you have kind of complex 3D geometry like this, in plan view, it can come in as kind of lots of lines and look quite blocky and blurry. So I like to include kind of simplified 2D graphics alongside these components so that my plans look the way I want them to. Again, like everything in SketchUp and layout, once you've done this once I've drawn all this 2D information, then I can simply reuse this in lots and lots of different projects. Okay. Hopefully you're starting to get the idea. Every time I model something like this, I just save it to my component library to be reused again on a future project. So while this might seem complex, it actually speeds things up even further when you have several instances of these components in your model. Obviously, you only have to make the changes to one set of 2D line work and 3D model, and everything else in the model is automatically updated. This technique also allows you to have complete control over how your 2D drawings look, rather than having to settle for what the software throws out from your 3D model. So to illustrate this point, let's just quickly take a section through these three elements. If I cut a slice through here, doesn't matter what we call it for the time being, I'll just move this section cut down so that it cuts through kind of our kitchen, our wardrobe, and our door, like this. And if I go simply to align view, here is a plan view of those three elements, and I will also set the camera to parallel projection very quickly. Okay, so now we can see, if we hide section planes for a minute, here is my kind of door. You'll see I've got a 3D cut through the door itself, as well as my 2D information. Likewise, I've got kind of some overlapping elements here between the 3D geometry and the 2D line work. And you'll see the flicker here between the black kind of sink and the cooktop with all the kind of lines and everything. So all I need to do here, if I quickly just turn off 3D only, now you'll see I get a much neater 2D representation of my door, my wardrobe, and my kitchen. Much simpler, much neater, and much easier. Okay, so some of you may have already been familiar with this process from the quick start guide, and that's fine, but we're not finished yet. Here we are back in our schematic building from the previous module. Let's quickly create a window component here. I'm just going to draw a rectangle on the floor plane. I'm going to set that at 900 wide by 900 high, a nice square window. I'll quickly offset that rectangle by 50 mil to create a frame, and I'll push pull it by 90 mil to give it some depth. Okay, let's just quickly apply a transparent material to this to make it glazing, and let's just say a dark color to the frame. Okay, all good. So if we select all this, right click, make component, and I get this dialog box. Let's just call it window test. What I want to draw your attention to here is this alignment section. Let's just set this to any, and I'll show you why in a minute. We also just want to set the axes for the model with the outside face of our window. So if we click on set component axes, we can choose an origin and just align the axes the same way that we do with our SketchUp model, and click create. Okay, so now we have a component in our model. If we zoom out a little bit, if we go to our components window and click on the in model tab here, here is our window test component. If I drag this component into my model, because I've told SketchUp to glue this component to any face, you'll see that the orientation of the component automatically changes to align with whichever face I place it on, including the pitch of the roof, regardless of what the pitch is. If I click to place it on the roof, all I need to do is draw a rectangle around my roof light and then push pull to create an opening. And here's my skyline. Okay, so hopefully you can see how powerful something so simple as that can be. If we go to properties for this window test component, you see you can also allow the component to cut an opening. With this ticked, if I then drag a window in, you'll see that it automatically creates a hole in the roof for me. And if I move that component around, the hole moves around with it. The only downside to this is that it only cuts a hole in the face in which it's placed. So you either have to manually cut the other hole on the internal face, or there's plugins such as Double Cut that you can use to do that for you. Okay, the last thing I want to talk to you in respect to smart components is metadata or component attributes. Now, I know that I said I wasn't going to get into dynamic components, and I'm not, but I do want to show you how to assign component attributes very quickly. Component attributes are essentially qualities or information that you assign to a component that stay with that component and also with every instance of that component in your model. In the first instance, if we click on this window component that I've got here, you'll see over here in the entity info that we've got advanced attributes that we can toggle open and close by using this little symbol here. So in here, I can give this component, for example, a price. Let's just say it's $200. We can give it a size. Let's call it 900 wide by 400 high. Okay, we could also add a URL for a specific manufacturer's website, for example, etc., etc. We can also give it, if you want to, an IFC code here, and you can select from a list. Okay, so that's kind of the basic attributes that you can assign to any component. But if we right click on this component and go down here to dynamic components, let's open up component attributes. So in here we've got each of the elements that are contained within this component itself. We've got a frame, the awning, the glass, and another group, which are these dashed lines here. But we want to just give the overall component some attributes. So up here where it says 900 wide awning window, let's click on the plus symbol to add an attribute. And this is all we're interested in. This is kind of where it starts to get complicated with dynamic components, and we won't go into that. But if we just select component info, if you select the word component info, you can add all of these 4 attributes to your model. So let's just select that. So now it's just a case of filling this information out. So we fast forwarded a few moments and you can see that I have filled in this information. I've called this window 900mm awning window. I've added a more detailed description in here, and I've also given the window a window type. So in this instance, I've called it WA for window type A. We'll come back to this later in the next module when we look at producing window and door schedules. So now if we again right click on this window, go to dynamic components and select component options, here you'll see I get a view of the window. Here's my description, my name, and my code for that window. So if we right click on this component and go to save as, you can add this component to your components library and use it again in future projects. So what is all this for? Okay, let me show you. If we save this model and then simply go File, Send to Layout. Layout will open with our default template and the last save view of our model. It doesn't really matter what scene we've got selected, so long as this window component is visible. And what I want to show you is this. If I now select the label tool that we used previously in our schematic drawing set and quickly set the leader and note out like this. Now when I get to the text element, you'll notice that I get this little drop down button here. And what this allows me to do is to choose from all of those attributes that I just assigned to this component. So I might be able just to call it 900 wide awning window and click off, and then I get this note. If I then double click on this note, I can choose it to something else. So let's put the more detailed description in and click off. Okay, now this text needs to be resized. So if I double click to select the text block, I can resize that so that it fits better on the page. And there you'll see that layout pre-fills the note for me with the item description. Now, if we go back into SketchUp and let's just change, for example, the color of the frame finish for this window. Let's just type in black. Okay, if we save that and then go back into layout again, All we have to do is right click on the viewport, update model reference, and you'll see that that note automatically changes to reflect what we've just done in SketchUp. Hopefully you can see how powerful this is, especially when you've got multiple instances of the same component within your model. With one update, all of those notes would automatically be updated to match those changes. Okay, so that's it for this lesson. Hopefully you can start to see how using smart components in this way will not only increase the speed of your modeling, but also the richness of your model in terms of useful data. In the next lesson, we'll look at using SketchUp's Match Photo tool to place your model in a realistic context. See you there.